but hello. Oh man, I'm not subscribed to Adam anymore. How awful. So, how am I? I am doing well. I'm working on the leaderboard system for the game at the moment. Which, basically, it's where we'd have like all these stats, such as, you know, for week one, for online games, who has the most goals, stuff like that. I'm gonna stream some brackets. Like, yeah, update 4 has got, the new level. The new level's got some really good music. I really like the. It's kind of funny. Every time we get a new track from Lee Miller, who's the composer, it's always my favorite track. So it's pretty cool when, every single time he comes out with something, it's like, oh yeah, this is better than last time. It's like, how does he do it? I don't know. But the new level, I really like it. It's got the mushrooms in it. Like, I can just boot that up. I'll make sure it's actually captured here. But yeah, we got the UI level going on, which is pretty awesome. Got Adam made all this cool stuff, so we can look around. Pretty waterfalls. We actually put the water that I spent forever working on into the game somewhere, which is also pretty cool. And we got actual reflections and stuff working, which is kind of why we used Unreal to begin with, is that we could do some lighting. So it's nice to actually have some lighting and some little characters running around. Oh man, there's somebody actually in Chicago. Well, let's go drop into their game and beat the hell out of them. Oh, it's Tyler Paraby. I know this guy. He's playing the sticky ball match with 10 balls. Yeah, the sticky ball the sticky ball playlist multi ball has 10 balls in it, which is just hilarious because you get for every ball that's following you it slows you down a little bit. So if you get all 10 balls following you, like your guy can't even run, like he can't move. Well, I like the mushrooms in this level. I have no comment on mushrooms otherwise, unless they're like in stir fry. Those are good. Or on pizza, those are good as well. These balls are just flying around. So you get so many of these balls following you that you can't run. You're just trotting along. It looks like the lighting on the balls is all screwed up too. It looks like the some of the lights have stuck to the balls. Like we've seen that problem with static lights, static point lights with Unreal, where the balls will actually have this problem where static lights stick to them and they won't undo the light until. Oh, he's gonna steal him. No, no, I took so long getting those balls, Tyler. You got it. No, why? Fine, I see how it is. So punch the hell out of these things. We'll just take a few at a time. Oh, he's gonna get me, isn't he? All right, there we go. That's one. I don't think Sticky Ball will ever be viable. Yeah, it's kind of a bullshit game mode. I'll be honest with you. It's been a while since update 2. Yeah, there's cool stuff here. Slam. Man, 7 goals. Anyway, I gotta get back to doing work. So I'll thank him for playing for a bit. Get back to some of this. Alright, so I'm at the point where I've got my leaderboards, they're in the cache, I've got the function in order to do it. What I need to do is so I need to fetch. Alright, so if they don't specify the intervals that I want to be fetching for, then I'm gonna fetch the all the common intervals, and if they don't specify contexts, I want to specify all the contexts, and if they don't specify a stat, I want to return all the stats. So what we're gonna do is build everything out here. So if the intervals is that, then we'll snag all the intervals. Alright, so if request dot what stat contexts equals null, then so the issue here is for our enums, I don't have an array list of stuff. Excuse me. You're making your own 2D game as well, and you're hoping to launch it on Steam Early Access on April 20th. Well, that's coming up. That's pretty cool. What kind of you may have already told me, and I'm sorry if I do not remember, but what kind of game are you working on? I could have a static block of code here which creates the array list. That's over optimization. Let's just so I'm looking at the 2-array stuff. Yeah, your Steam page is already approved, just waiting for the build. It should be any day now. It's a platform where you can clean trash and soon it'll be goo as well as other. Wow, that sounds great. Yeah, we've got we started doing Steamworks stuff, but pretty much all we've got is our app registered, and we've paid our money to Valve to reserve the name and all that stuff. We'll see. What we want to do is we want to get the game to a point, because Steam launch for us is basically like, if it's going to be successful, Steam launch is where it's at. what am I doing? I need to create an array list of stat leaderboards. So let's go do that. Alright, so basically we're going to do for every string interval ID in. We already have all of our intervals here, so should we? Nah, we're not guaranteed for it. Alright, so if request.statContext equals null, otherwise so it's kind of copy paste, but whatever. So this will be the stat context. But yeah, is that your first game, Gummytainment? Or I'm assuming with Gummytainment as your name, you've probably been working on games for a while, if that's your handle. Is that the first game that you launched on Steam, or is this just yet another game for you? So if request.statNames equals null, otherwise we'll do that. So it's going to be for string stat name, and this will be stat wd stat names. The first one to finish and make public. Well, hey, excellent. And this code looks ugly as hell here. It's basically this copy-paste thing, but the problem is these data structures don't match up, and I'd have to do a copy of the data structures. Or create a static array list of these things, but that's kind of nasty. I don't know. I'll just do what I do here. And I don't trust the array list to array function. I just don't. Game Maker Studio. Very good. Yeah, I went to Steam Dev Days. I think it was year before last. Talked to one dude who had been working on a game in Game Maker for like 6 years. And I was just like, God, that's a long time to to be working on this crap. No, we don't want to call fetch stat leaderboard. We're calling get leaderboard 4. Context ID name. You really want to quit your job? I think that's you and like everyone. Well, a lot of people. Alright, so we actually want, like, we got the raw stats here, and that's not what we want. We want the user stat leaderboard here. One year before running out of money, you'd like to avoid going back to work as a DBA sysadmin? Ouch. Yeah. Yeah, I think all of the DBAs I've worked with have had a distinct lack of hair on their head. I imagine it's because all of the frustration from dealing with databases all day just like has to go somewhere, and it just blows away your hair eventually. So let's see. I need to change this guy. So I'm actually going to have to make this new leaderboard here. Lots of hairs, but lots of gray now. Hey, it works. Alright, so let's get this database res. Where is it? Where is it? It's right here. DB res. Yeah, so user stat history. Alright, Gummitainment, thanks for sticking around. Problem isn't the DB, it's the developers. Oh man. Yeah, that's true. I think my worst database story was like I took one vacation when I was at EA2D for 1 week, where I went from San Francisco and like visited people in Seattle and stuff like that. And halfway through that vacation, I got a call, and this was like like a year and a half after college. So the place I was visiting at the time was kind of the frat boy house for the college, which is a tiny college, but we had one house that actually was, like a whole bunch of people who, were still living kind of in group homes, and that's where everybody partied and all that sort of stuff. So I was like there in the morning after whatever we did the previous night, and like people are just like walking around their underwear because it's all a bunch of dudes and this thing, and I get Skyped from the team in San Francisco, so I've got like my laptop out at the breakfast table with a bunch of hungover dudes, and it's literally everybody, the entire studio on the other side of this Skype call in an all hands meeting because the servers are down, and it's the only time they had to shut Dragon Age Legends off for any length of time. And I'm just like, oh Jesus Christ. Like the other people at the table are doing, the regular shenanigans and bullshit. I'm like, well, I kind of got to fix like the server system here, guys. Can you keep it down? Also, dude, put on some pants, or don't walk behind me. And so they're basically like, all right, the servers are down. Like, we don't know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do from Seattle? Like, I don't have any of my tools. Like, there are 5 other platform engineers on your project. Like, they're like, yeah, well, none of them know how to fix it. So I was like, okay, cool. So I then drove to San Francisco. At the end of this whole saga, it was basically that one of the game developers, not one of the back end platform guys, one of the game devs had added a call to fetch every user's friends. So it's a Facebook game, so it's all about, inviting your friends to do things. So, but you have to think about that. In Facebook games, somebody actually has like 2,000 friends on Facebook. There are also people who have 2,000 friends on Facebook who all play the game that you're playing. Like literally those people exist. And so one of the game developers had the great idea of putting a for loop for every friend load their player state from the backend database. So he did that, and he didn't cache it anywhere. So, and this function was called 6 times in a row. So it would go through and kick off, what would be 6 times 2,000 requests to fetch the entire state for all your friends. So, 6 times 2,000 is 12,000 database calls. And that of course, when one of those people would log in, immediately all that server that they were on would just time out and stop. And of course, what would happen is that person would log in. They like playing the game, right? So it'd take one server out. So what does that person do? Well, they hit the F5 key, and it hits another server on the back end, and it takes that server off. And so they're just jamming the F5 key, and it just literally one by one takes down every server in production. And there's not just one of these people, right? If one person has 2,000 friends, and of those 2,000 friends, they all play the game, there's 2,000 of those people that are all friends with each other. That's just how these things work. So the kicker is that I got back, and within 30 minutes, I looked through the data, and I was like, what the hell is this? Hey, you guys, has anybody looked at the fucking database? It's totally slammed. And of course, the 5 other platform engineers who are fully qualified for their positions had not actually checked the fucking database, and instead just blamed the game for being the problem. So I checked the database. All right, tons of database calls. All right, cool. Let's go through, get version control history. Are there any new database calls? Yes, to the player state for every player in a tight loop 6 times. Okay, who the fuck wrote this? Go over to the dude's desk. He's like, oh, that feature? Yeah, so we were trying to build the friend bar stuff out, but the feature was cut, so I just left the code in there. And I was just like, are you fucking for real? So the feature was cut, so literally it was dead code that did nothing for the entire goddamn project except just take down all the servers. And I was just floored. I was like, okay, so the only vacation that I've ever taken in 2 years gets cut short because some dude wrote code for a feature that doesn't get used, was the most naive crap on the universe, and nobody could fix it because they're all fully qualified for their positions. So that was a thing. I am not salty about that. I am absolutely fine with how all that happened. So, yeah. Anyway, let's shove all these stats into our stats leaderboard here. Is the account ID? Oh, it's not a thing. All right, so let's regen that. But that sort of crap happens all the time, so I can see why you'd hate the developers. Oh, that's 30 million users. 30 million users. That's pretty cool. Lots of interesting stuff there. Now, what would have 30 million users? I know. You run the back-end servers for OkCupid. That would be my guess. Something like that. But I have no clue. Alright, so we got the leaderboard stuff. Alright. Yeah, because I know, like, for Dragon Age Legends, I think we had about 8 million accounts or something like that after 3 years. We're going to have 8 million Brackensec accounts, guaranteed. They're all going to be Russian bots. I'm going to make sure that we get to that number, though. Alright, so we got the number that's going to be there. It's going to do that. So these are going to be in order, so that's good. So what we can do is if somebody has requested a certain number, we can truncate. We can make a new leaderboard and, like, truncate it. Each user was assigned a specific bunch. So if a user managed to slam a server, he's not assigned to a new server, so there was no cascading failure. It's better to drop 10% traffic than 100% traffic. Yeah, that's not a bad plan. That requires like things like forethought and planning, and that's not something that I do very often. So that's a smarter thing than... What the fuck am I doing? I should just stop. I'll just simplify this. Sure, it's extra copies and stuff like that. But whatever. We're in Java land. We're calling the database. I should just stop trying to be clever. We had coding conventions that I wrote for our Amazon team. And just number one was just don't be clever. Uptime isn't impacted on paper because 90% of the users can still do it. It's just a small interruption. It's not downtime. It's not downtime. Our SLA isn't infringed. It's just a bug for a certain subset of users. All right, so we'll grab the leaderboard, and basically what we're going to want to do is we don't want, like, they asked for a top number of users, so what we can do is trim it down. So we can't edit this thing, so if the board is going to be null, then we weren't able to fetch the leaderboard for him, so we should just go ahead and like just craft an error and return that. Otherwise, we want to check if board dot stats.size? Stats.statValues.size is greater than the request.top number. Then what we can do is make a new stat leaderboard. it's kind of stupid, but well, I guess we don't need that. So we'll just add up to, you know, what they requested, and then we'll just say a board equals new board. And then we just do boards.add a board. Alright. Well, that's something to think about. Like, I haven't really thought about segmenting users to specific servers. Like, it's not a pattern we used in game development. I'd imagine patterns like that, like game development, like there's a lot of arrogance in game developers. All right, yeah, Carry Unix. Have a good night. Thanks for sticking around. There's a lot of arrogance with game developers and all that, where, you know, like, we're the cutting edge all the time and blah blah blah. So I think there's kind of a bad pattern of game devs never look at any other programming for better patterns. So with like segmenting users to specific machines and stuff like that, you know, you'd have a back end, you know, like a load balancer socket server, which puts messages off onto something which gets processed by your back end. And different servers actually pull off different queues based on all that. Seems like a pattern that's pretty, like at face value, it's just a good idea. So you would imagine that that's just what people do. But it's not something I've ever encountered in game industry. Didn't do that at all. I'm wondering if that's mainly because of it's not a common pattern, or if it's just stuff that's, you know, unlearned. Because I don't teach any of that shit in college. Yeah, it's really easy to implement, right? You know, like, as long as you have a message passing system and a front end, like, socket load balancer system, you know, it's just like, you're a user, you go here, done. Because even, like, dynamic sharding really isn't that hard if you have, you know, a fluid amount of back-end servers. You're just like, well, we'll just reshard you, no problem. There's 3 servers online, mod 3, whatever. A new server came up, cool. Well, as new users come in, they'll get routed to that new server. You know, it's just how it goes. But a lot of the time with game development, what I found is there's no time to implement a lot of those systems because you're just rushing to get shit out the door, and there's already so much risk in shipping a game that adding time to the development backlog to be more stable is really hard. Yeah, exactly. Number of server assigned. Yeah, it's that. It's that simple. So what'll end up happening is like it'd be like, how do things like, you know, the Diablo 3 launch, how does that happen? how does the SimCity launch happen? Like, how do they do that? Well, it's a lot easier than you think. Because nobody in game development gives two shits about nines and all that stuff. Because it's so difficult just to get the game out the door to begin with that a lot of those, like, stability stuff is like, all right, cool, well, we're going to have a game first anyway, so stability just gets kicked off the back of the truck. All right, so yeah, thankfully I don't think this game is going to be like, 30 million users or something like that. So I'm not going to have to do too much sharding and a lot of craziness. And if it does explode to that big, shit, like, good problems. Oh my god, Adam, we have so many people. Yeah, well, they all had to have paid us. Yeah. The servers are down. I've got a great idea. Let's just change our names, take our money, and retire. Oh, I like how you think. We'll just hire somebody else to take the blame. Yeah, they release a game every 10 years. It was actually kind of an interesting thing there, is like, with Diablo 3, I think, like, Blizzard Activision, the acquisition there, where basically the reason why Blizzard kept a lot of its creative control was because its valuation was based also on its future earnings. It was a single desktop tower computer. Yeah. That's why it's always waiting for stuff. It was probably a Windows box too, so get Windows updated and then you couldn't play. But the reason Blizzard retained creative control over, like, Diablo 3 was because they marked their valuation with their potential future earnings to the company. So it kept Activision's, like, stake in the company under 50%. So they couldn't, like, mess with them. So, of course, as that number, as, like, the valuation and money goes up, you start being like, well, this game has to be this big and make this much money, otherwise we lose creative control. So it's kind of interesting. Blizzard shipping actually also was kind of rolling the dice on its decision-making power over itself, because if the game didn't make enough money, Activision would have more control of their company. So in some ways, they didn't want to ship Diablo 3, I think, because it needed to be bigger. So they're like, shit. We gotta add real money auction house. I need to actually do work here, don't I? Okay, so we have our board, all this stuff. We need to return our response, so let's make a response and set its stuff. Can't get spelled fucking boards properly. Okay, so it's just going to go through, it's going to grab all the boards. If you didn't ask for that many members, it's going to not do that. Otherwise, it's going to fetch absolutely everything and return it. So, do we just implement leaderboards for the game? I think so. How are we reporting stats? So we have report results. Where is report stats? So we get our stats database, we replace batch insert into stats, transactional DB call, adjust stats. We're not doing anything with our stats history. Okay, so that's something else I need to think about, is stats history is not reported at the moment. And I'm guessing results history also is not being populated. They had a nice cash machine. It's true. It's still running. So report results looks like it throws the results into just the user results. Okay, so results does the same thing. Yeah, so I don't know if you saw what I was doing yesterday, but the most complicated thing I did yesterday was the issue with stats is that some of the stats are adjustments. So, you know, it's a stat such as, you know, online goals. Shit, I'm gonna need to write interval data in here. So it'll be like, you know, all-time goals, and you're just like reporting a single goal each time. So how do you adjust that in a big call for, you know, like 10 different users, like a game server reports everything at the end? How do you do that without doing a database call for every single thing? So I had done a kind of I made a temp table, inserted all the values, all the adjustment values into it, and then I did a replace into the main table with a left join on the temp table based on the keys, and then did a coalesce on the actual value, so it would add them together. So I don't know if you have an opinion, if you're Mr. Super Database Admin DBA man, but making a temp table, doing a left join with that temp table onto the and then inserting that into the main table with a coalesce, if that's going to explode MySQL, or if it's just like stop being stupid and just run individual calls because trying to be too clever. Alright, so stats results is not reported for intervals, and stats history is not reported for intervals at the moment. So I'll have to do that. Okay, so get interval result leaderboard. So let's go back to the drawing board. Then Redis is your BFF. Yeah, well, I'm trying to keep infrastructure costs low and all that. So I'm trying to stick with MySQL, and I'm using Amazon's Aurora MySQL. So I'm trying to stick to that at the moment because it's cheap, and I don't want to. It's real easy to make a server infrastructure that is super goddamn expensive. Okay, so results history is going to be online, result context, interval context. So week 1, result name, stat value. Let's see, result name is going to be mission 1. Result is going to be, we have enums for mission result? Yeah, so this will be like bronze. Our stat value is going to be something like 100. And our duration is going to be something like, 5,000, 120 seconds or whatever. Redis on Amazon is called Elasticache. Yeah, but I don't even want to pay for Elasticache, right? Like, if I'm already paying for something, I don't want to pay for more. So, because especially if we're not a free-to-play game, And we're not a subscription-based game, so our monetization model is premium, which means we need to keep those costs low as possible because we're trying to not gouge people. Anyway, I've seen so many games shut down because they're just too expensive to run. That's usually what happens. Like Hawken and other things, they just get blown to bits. Okay, so for get interval results, so we have interval ID, result context, result names, top number, include users. Oh yeah, fuck, I didn't include users and cell. Those are just gonna have to be more things. So let me think here. So result context, result names. So we're gonna want like the online week 1, mission 1 results. So these leaderboards have got, how many of these do we have? We've got 2 of these, 6 of these. How many missions have we got? Let's just say 300 missions. And how many people is this? This is, let me just do it with another 100. So the number of calls is going to be, number of different score tables is going to be about 4,000. Okay, so for the interval results, we're probably going to have to do leaderboards a lot more specific than, like, we don't want the top 100 for a specific thing. We're going to have to go, like, dial this back. So maybe we could do, like, the top 10 for a mission, for an interval. It's still 4,000 leaderboards. Alright, so if we got 4,000 here, what's the data size going to be for this? What were my previous calculations? It's like 420 times 6 times 300 times 2. So this is going to be about 14 megabytes of information total for these things, and it's going to take 4,000 database calls to actually select all the information from this. Well, that's a bit of a problem. Yeah, I have used Redis in the past for some other stuff, like logs and some other stuff, and it works well. I haven't had any problems with it. I'm just not... There's already enough risk in the project. I don't want to explore that any more than I have to. So let me think. So this is a different, like, order of magnitude of thing. Like, the difference between 300 missions and 300 stats is 30 stats is staggering here. It pretty much means we would need a stats service that just sits there crunching stats all the time. If we wanted these boards to be updated that often. The other thing for the results is we could not have the leaderboards actually contain that much information. We could have the leaderboards, because what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to have the leaderboard, like the history table, actually have everybody's results for that time period. So you could go look up, like, if you had 10 friends or something else, you could actually make a little high score table of your 10 friends for like 3 weeks ago. So I can cache all this information. That's not a problem. We can have kind of users request this information slowly. Like you're not going to look at the high score table for every mission all at once. You could like kind of page through the mission list or something and see. We could have the UI just be gated, so you could like select mission 2, and then you could like look at the high score table. Go to the high score page, and it would say, well, the top 10 worldwide are scores are this, and then the top 10 for your friends are this. That's fine. It could hold data. I'm not super worried about the size of this data because I've already got it kind of pruned. I can prune it out and all that stuff, like I'm more worried about the number of database calls and setting up new services just to do stuff like stats. I'm trying not to make the architecture more complicated than it needs to be. Because I'm only one dude, right? As opposed to like if you had a team of 5 engineers or something, it's easier to make a whole bunch of small services because then everybody can work in their own box without screwing with each other. But when it's just one person, if you get a big complex architecture, there's just more stuff to fix. Well, the pricing's definitely per query. It's not like I get charged money per query or something. It's, I actually have to make an external call to the database to fetch everything. So 4,000 calls is 4,000 round trips to build that information. Well, why don't we think about it? So if we had 4,000 of these, and I could just not update, the cache could just not update very often. So let's say we cache the information every like 10 minutes for this. So 4,000 calls over 10 minutes. I could see that working. So like a 10-minute high score thing for results seems like it might be a decent idea. So I think that'll work. So we'll use the same pattern as we did before. Just we'll just have it not be so aggressive with the caching, and we'll get away with it. So it should be fine. So we're gonna need to do the same thing here with this. We're gonna need a user result leaderboard. So it'll be interval stat context stat name. It's going to be result context result name. We'll do a user leaderboard result. And let's see, results have these things on them. So we're going to need stat value. We actually called it stat value? All right. We'll have the account ID, and we also need the result. So result, stat value, and duration. All right. Why would I need 400 queries? Because I need to. There are 4,000 different actual leaderboards because it's that many things. Just give me a second. I'll explain that better. Just need to regenerate this. So the issue is I've got a result context. So this is, so I want to get like the leaderboard for this specific mission. So what that's going to be is that's going to be like, you know, select star from user results table where, you know, interval ID equals, you know, week 1 and the result context equals mission 1. You know, order by, this will be stat value, descending, limit 100. So that's our select for, you know, that'll give us our leaderboard for week 1 for like all of our performance on mission 1. But, you know, that's a single select call. So, I mean, how do you, you know, and then we have to do that for every mission in the game. So, you know, we need result context equals mission 2, and we need to have a separate limit for that. So, you know, we can't just limit the other thing there. So, I mean, I guess I could do like something where I create a temporary table and then run a bunch of selects or something else. But how JDCB works with the database with Java is it doesn't actually, like if you have all these prepared statements, it'll actually execute one after another with a round trip to the database in between them. So it doesn't just like execute all 4,000 at once and return all the information. It's just, it does them like one at a time. It's annoying. So I'd have to write like a stored procedure in the database to return everything. And I don't want to get into stored procs for this stuff. So if there's a single statement that can select everything, well, it would be I want to load for every interval, for every mission, and for every context. So it would be I want all the information for those specific things, but for each unique combination of interval ID, result context, and stat